you've had a torrid last few years. Some people aren't aware of all this stuff. Are you able to take us through?
I essentially just basically started standing up for women's rights and got, the popular phrase for it is cancelled. Because at the moment, being a supporter of women's rights is extremely unfashionable.
Yeah, it seems so. Do you remember the very first time that you dipped your toe into this and how the reaction was?
I can't remember the first time, but I do remember that I was a kind of a harbinger of, is it harbinger or harbinger? But a harbinger it is now. I liked to tweet, It was only then I realized that there was an entire kind of class of people online who were kind of keeping an eye on people's likes and seeing what they were endorsing. And it was literally a tweet saying, people with gender dysphoria need the best care you can possibly get. And at the same time, women need single-sex spaces, And I liked that tweet, and it immediately started going out. Glinner is a turf. Glinner is my Twitter name. And rather, a lot of people, because the pushback is so vicious, a lot of people, they get scared and they back off it. But I didn't have an employer. I've always been a freelancer. So there was no one to tell me to stop. So I possibly, in a foolhardy way, just kept going, But, I'm right. And I won't lie.
Yeah.
And at the moment, there's intense pressure on people to lie. And I won't do it.
It is such a strange one because for me, I don't even have to say what side I am, or even if I agree with you or whatever, because I think it's irrelevant, because the main point is that you're allowed to express your opinion. As long as you're not saying these people should be killed or whatever, and you're actually saying these people need a lot of care and help, something similar to what J.K. Rowling has said. Why has there been so much attention on you and J.K. Rowling and very few other people who are saying probably much more extreme things?
Oh, because but two reasons. First of all, the first reason is that both of us are impeccably left-wing. And the cancel culture doesn't come after people who are right-wing. They come after left-wingers. It's a movement that tries to destroy heretics within.
Interesting.
Yeah. And second is because we both wrote things that were kind of beloved by the generation that was trying to cancel us. It's almost like a getting back at mum and dad thing. It was the fact that they couldn't get us on anything. I've always been very active on issues like climate change and abortion. There was nothing they could use against me. So, that's when you're the biggest target, the bigger, the more kind of, boxes you tick as a good progressive, the harder they come for you.
I suppose if we're thinking, I always do this, I'm guilty of always looking at evolutionary reasons for things and just guessing stuff. But I suppose that in your tribe, if there was somebody who disagreed a bit, you'd have a reason to really want to kick them out. Whereas if there was just a totally different tribe, you're not that bothered, you just want to avoid them.
That's a good point. And also, you see that the biggest kind of differences that people have. What's that phrase? The bigotry of small differences.
Oh, yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
The situation in Northern Ireland where, you have two people who are divided only by, almost a random occurrence, which is they happen to be born Catholic, happen to be born Protestant, and you hate, they there was a time when they hated each other more than any other group in the world, and it's kind of crazy. But yeah, it's I think you're right. I think it's the thing of trying to keep the tribe pure, that meant that me and JK had to go. But also, part of the problem is that the propaganda that they so carelessly spread trans rights activists is that people like me and her who want to protect single-sex spaces and want children to not be experimented on with drugs that have had no long-term studies. The thing they do is they tell other people, other trans people, other allies, that we hate them and we want to kill them. And the language they use is kind of like this kind of boiling heat. Genocide, transgenocide is used a lot, phrases like this. And they are trying to convince this often very vulnerable group of people that we want them dead, So yeah, it's kind of a consequence of that, like, Bunsen burner that's underneath the conversation.
How did you feel? I want to get into how you felt when this started happening to you. I mean, cancellation is I find it a boring word because it's just overused. It doesn't mean anything anymore. Just what does that mean? Oh, cancelled. What actually happened to you, and how did it make you feel?
Well, I was just saying things that people have said for 100 years, since the suffragettes won, rights for women, that women need single-sex spaces and they deserve fair sports, and men have certain advantages that women don't have, and that should be taken into account when talking about things like sports. And it was just considered the most offensive thing that I could have said, and I was saying things that I knew my friends agreed with. I knew we'd all just assumed all this stuff to be true for our whole lives. And yet, rather than kind of backing me up and saying, Graham isn't saying anything weird here, I was just kind of abandoned, And I would speak to people. I would just say, will you just say, just something along the lines of women deserve fair sports? And of course, it's not a mad opinion. And I absolutely refused. People would refuse. And it was like, I couldn't understand it. And it was only after being so completely monstered and frozen out of my business and or my comedy writing and so on that I kind of realized no one was coming along, So in the end, I had to write a freaking book to explain my position, because it's so often misinterpreted or deliberately misconstrued. I'm fond of saying this because it's so extraordinary to me. 75 plus hit pieces written about me by Pink News, and it's just an attempt to destroy my reputation because I don't agree with what I think is a very regressive, homophobic, and most of all misogynistic set of beliefs.
Man, speaking to you just before off camera, I mean, the first thing that you just said to me was, I got a round of applause. I hope you don't mind me saying, I got a round of applause. I need to message my mum. It's meeting you. It's
standing ovation.
No, but it's instantly clear that this has been a really turbulent time for you, and that you're incredibly it's still very raw for you. You're very emotional about it.
Yeah, it's sometimes, and also, because of the stress of when your book comes out, I'm not sleeping great at the moment, so you get a bit emotional and weepy, and I have to guard against it because otherwise I'll be doing it all the time, But yeah, it makes me emotional, and I'm extremely moved when, as happened at the interview today, people stood up for me. It means the world, and most of the day is spent reading about what a terrible monster I am. So when something like that happens, yeah, it's very special. My mum will be delighted.
What is it like for your mum? Because I know from experience that when you start getting into these things, one's mum starts clipping the things, and it's all very exciting. You would a
she
national
wouldn't be
icon.
clipping any of the things that have been said recently about me. Yeah, no, it was tough. It's been tough on them. They don't understand it. And you try and say to them, they're literally saying that men who have a penis are lesbians.
Yeah.
And it's
the UN said that.
What?
The UN said that.
Yeah, it's homophobic. It's homophobic, and they don't, like a lot of people who encounter this subject, they don't quite believe it's happening in a weird way. It's like, my mum is always like, can you not just stop talking about it, And it's like, no, I can't. Like, it's the only way I can protect my daughter is by trying to destroy this on a wider level, on a wider stage. Because I can't follow her around the place and make sure that every single-sex space she goes is intact, and she'll be safe in there. So you have to address it on a wider level, so that girls like my daughter will be safe. And yeah, so
Did that influence why you started speaking out, having your daughter?
definitely, yeah, definitely. I dedicated the book to my daughter because it's all for her, and as I say, she because they're kids. She's 18, my son is 16. Because they're kids, they don't know that this stuff is abnormal. They think they've grown up in it, so they just think this is what the world is like. And it's I want them to know that this is completely unprecedented. This has never happened before in the history. There's never been such a concerted attempt to destroy the meaning of fundamental words like woman and man. It is a assault on our sanity. And that's what I kind of want them to know, that it's not the way the world works. It's just a kind of consequence of broadband, that like ideas that are sometimes incredibly crazy spread so quickly now, and we don't really know how to inoculate ourselves against some of these terrible ideas. Apparently, when the printing press was invented, the subsequent years is where the Reformation happened, and a lot of kind of religious cults formed for similar reasons. Suddenly, everybody who had a belief was able to, like there were all these kind of mathematical theories. 7 days, and the seventh day this will happen, and there were loads of people waiting for the end of the world that didn't come along. And a similar thing has happened with the invention of the internet. You have a kind of almost like a naturally rising cult, which is based around the idea that one sex is actually not real. It's something that can be changed, or something that doesn't matter. And it does matter. It matters to a woman walking home at night. It matters to a woman on a swim team who has to race against a man who's like got twice her muscle mass and strength. It matters. And I had to write the book just to make sure they know that it's not, what's happening is not standard. It's a strange thing, and it at least needs to be addressed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Part of the problem at the moment is that no one's even addressing it. It's like, oh, this is normal. It's not normal. And also, if there's going to be such a massive change in the way we think about men and women and the way we think about single-sex spaces, it has to have a discussion. But it's been skipped over. The discussion just has been skipped over. And in fact, anyone trying to even have the discussion is painted as a bigot.
That's it, yeah.
So yeah, that's the kind of reason I've done everything, really.
I think you say it hasn't happened before. I think it has, but not necessarily in the mainstream. I think, the Stasi would have done things like that. The Nazis changed, and before anyone,
sure,
people are going to say I'm comparing trans people to Nazis. I'm not suggesting that. I know everyone's going to get angry, but they did, Untermenschen and those kinds of words they would use to describe the Jews, and those kinds of things do happen. Words start to change meaning, but that's a sign of bad stuff.
Well, have you read Erich Hoffer, The True Believer?
No, I know the name. I think
he was like this. I think he was a longshoreman who kind of taught himself. Wrote in 1953 a book called The True Believer, which is about the nature of mass movements like communism, Nazism, and even Christianity, And there are so many parallels to what's happening now, Like one of the things he points out, that Nazis did this, communists did this, and even Christianity did this. They destroyed a family. Apparently Jesus, one line in the Bible, he says, I will turn brother against brother, I will turn husband against wife. And what Hoffer says that means is basically Christianity, when it came along, it was enormously, you would have these battles between people who, were still believing in the old way of things, and Christianity, which came along like a broom and collected sorry, wrong metaphor, but collected all these people. And I think that's what's happening right now. I know so many families who've lost daughters because the daughters are taking testosterone against the parents' wishes. And you have these kids who are very vulnerable, and they're out in the street, or they've cut off all contact, and it's a nightmarish scenario, but it does have in common with a lot of other mass movements in the past, whereby the first thing they do is try and weaken those bonds between family members.
Yeah, well, this is it, because my channel, mostly before, I haven't done too much about trans. I have interviewed some sort of trans people, often the controversial ones who don't go along with a lot of the ideology, because the ones who do won't come on the show. I keep asking them. They will not do it. And part of me understands, because they feel like that's their identity. They shouldn't have to explain it to someone who's skeptical, and I get that. But then part of me also thinks it might be because there's a circular reasoning that might be exposed after one or two questions.
I would say, I'm sure there's a few people who would be very extremely sensitive about their identity. However, I think the vast majority are just, they know they can't defend it. These positions are untenable. It's like, I'll give you a good example. If single-sex spaces don't exist, and a man who identifies as a woman can go into a woman's changing room or whatever it happens to be, you immediately stop observant religious Muslims, Jewish women from entering these spaces. So there's this kind of weird balance that's not really a balance. That, we're going to destroy women's spaces, and we also support Muslim people. Well, you don't, because you're not respecting their beliefs on this one. So they don't want to say these things out loud, because as soon as you express them, a friend of mine has a brilliant phrase. She says, trans rights activists cannot say what they believe on the grounds it may incriminate them. And it's I see it over and over again. These people cannot actually articulate their positions, because if they did, they would be arguing for instance, an end to women's sports, an end to women's spaces. Have you ever heard of the phrase the urinary leash?
No.
The urinary leash was I'm not sure who came up with it, but it was a feminist phrase. And it meant that before there were public toilets that divided into male and female, women couldn't really go far from their house. They were on a urinary leash, because once they got to a certain place, there was nowhere for them to go and be safe, They're arguing for that to be brought back,
Yeah.
And no one is but the conversation, the debate can't happen, because they pretend that's not their argument.
I suppose their argument, if we were to steel man the argument and make theirs the best it can be, is those women should learn to be as good and worthy and righteous as we are, and to recognize that these biological males are now women, and so they should be comfortable in changing rooms with them.
Sure, but again, like, how is a woman supposed to know the difference between, and I'll use an example of a friend of mine, my lovely trans friend Debbie Hayton.
Oh, she's been on the show.
Yeah, I thought you might have spoken to Debbie. But
Buck Angel's the other one that we've had.
Buck, amazing person. But how are women supposed to know the difference between Debbie and Andrew Miller, who has just been arrested for picking up a 11-year-old girl in Scotland and raping her over a series of days? And the judge made a point of saying that the reason this young girl got in the car was because he was dressed as a woman. How are individuals supposed to know the difference?
Yeah. Well, I've often heard people on that other side of the argument say, "Oh, so you're saying that trans people are going to all do horrible, devious things?" I think the response is no, but they'll probably do them at the same rate as biological men do, which is enough.
But it's also, the question is also, what does trans mean? I think one of the reasons that my cancellation was so kind of universally approved of was because most people thought I was talking about transsexuals, like Debbie. But that's not what's going on. You have people who are fully intact. Apparently the number is something like 83% of trans-identified men are fully intact. And they are demanding the same rights that we have very rightly given to transsexuals for years. And it's like, well, no, there's a difference. There is a difference. And the thing that really upsets me is that you see a lot of these kind of trans influencers who are, as I say, fully intact. And they're encouraging children to get these procedures done. And there's no such thing as a successful transition. You know, they all come with lifetime problems. If you transition, you're going to be going to the hospital a lot, you know, regularly. And that's not, no one's telling these kids this, you know?
One of the reasons I wanted to do this as well, like my channel has traditionally focused on cults, Scientology and things like that. And there are so many similarities, again, with the words that change and these kinds of things. And I thought eventually I have to come out and talk about this. And I know it's going to lose a lot of followers. And so be it, eventually you have to just say, well, and as you've said, we're not having a go at trans people or this or that. It's just saying, hang on, there are certain things that don't hold up to logic. And as soon as you start to do that, you're veering away from truth and science. And I think that is cult-like and it needs to be brought up.
I think you're right about it. It's an interesting one, though. It's like, it's not quite a cult, because I believe the definition of a cult needs a leader. And there's no leader here, but there is what I think called a kind of confluence of aims. Like, there's a lot of people who benefit from the kind of muddiness around terms like trans. So, like, for instance, one of the things I talk about in the book, bloke who called the police on me several times, has sued me twice, is a guy, Stephanie Hayden. And it's his third identity. He's a long-time con man who, in fact, you might want to cut this bit out because he will try and sue you. But like
just note to editor, maybe cut the name. Is that what we should?
Maybe a good idea.
Cut the name of that person.
Yes. And but what he does is he sends a legal document. Tries to frighten people, and then a few days later he says, "I'll drop the case for 500 quid." And with me, he went up to 4,500.
Wow!
Because he thought I was rich. So we said no, and unfortunately at that point I didn't know about crowdfunding, so we spent a lot of our own money trying to fight him, and eventually he just dropped it. But like, this is a guy who's on the run from people he owes rent to. There was a very funny moment in one trial where they were talking about. I think it was a conviction that he had. And he said, "Oh, that was just for passing bad checks in Wales." It's like, it's such a strange, why is that an excuse?
I was just passing bad checks.
Yeah, just bad, but like, it's a normal thing that people do. So he's a very good example of someone who is using the confusion around this issue, to make money. You know, and there's several examples of people like this. A lot of the people who are in this kind of some of the more vocal trans activists are, legitimately dangerous people. You know, they're legitimately mentally unwell. Some of them,
they're probably the outliers. But,
yes,
but maybe the point is, I guess the point is here. I've spoken about this before as well. I'm like wary of repeating myself for listeners. I'm not listening to this anymore. I've heard it before. But I did a poll on my YouTube channel. Are trans women literally, and I think I put literally in capital letters to be very clear, women? Are they literally women? And 90% said no, but 10% said yes.
Right.
And that 10% are saying a thing that's obviously not true. So I don't know what percentage of those people are saying it because they're pissed off I asked the question in maybe a misleading way, or who actually believes it. But what a lot of people in the comments said was, I don't really know, I don't care, but like, well, just be kind. Why does it matter? And I think what you're saying is, if you change these rules for certain people, then some other people who are the outliers, not, you're not having to go at the trans people.
Yeah.
It's people who can take advantage of it.
But having said that, unfortunately, a lot of these outliers are central figures in the trans movement. Like, the best example I can think of is someone called Amy Challoner. Amy Challoner was a rising star in the Green Party, was part of Stonewall's trans advisory board for years, at a time when they were introducing self-ID across society, and Challoner's father was a who assaulted a girl in the attic of the family home. Challoner is now going in a relationship with another whose father introduced him to. So his father turns out to have been a very dangerous groomer who seems to have kind of wrapped his adopted son up in all this stuff, and really kind of messed him up. But that is someone who was right at the heart of the trans movement and is still a moderator on Reddit, we think, So
But that's always going to happen with any movement because the loudest are the most lunatic-y.
yes, especially with this issue, because this is such a mad, some of the beliefs are so insane that anyone who is willing to go on and I don't know if you saw, but there was a bizarre debate with Frida Wallace and Peter Tatchell and Helen Joyce recently, where Frida Wallace is, he's just a deranged alcoholic man, he takes photographs of himself being blown in. This is all. Every time I talk about this, it sounds so unbelievable. But he takes photographs of himself being blown in a dungeon, Wow. And it's like, why is this man even being given the time of day? It's because he's the only one who's kind of, mad enough to say these opinions out loud, So, yes, the problem, it's not all trans. Of course, it's not all trans people. If I was saying that, I wouldn't be friends with Debbie, or I wouldn't be a supporter of Buck and people like this. Of course, it's not. But there are a number of very dangerous people who are using this activism, and they have too much traction. Amy Challoner, the person I just spoke about, managed to get Sadiq Khan to change tube announcements from ladies and gentlemen.
Wow.
So
these influence.
It's too much influence for people who are at best disordered in their thinking. And so but then you have someone like Debbie, and Debbie is like, respects women's spaces, doesn't use them, is fully transsexual, is an actual transsexual, and absolutely gets murdered by the same people.
Yeah.
There's
the bigotry of small differences.
Yeah. So why isn't Debbie like the person who is on all these news? I know he does go on news shows, and Debbie understands why I call him he. Okay. I have to at the moment. Why isn't Debbie seen as a leader? But Debbie is not seen as a leader. Debbie is seen as a turncoat and a traitor.
That's the worst.
Yeah. So he gets a terrible hard time from his, from what you would suppose would be his people, But I think it just proves that it's not a human rights movement. It's a political, ideological movement.
Those people who are on my YouTube saying like, look, I don't really know or care, but what's the harm? What's the harm? What is the simplest for those? Because they're not going to know about all the real, that's too much. Sure. What's the simplest way of explaining why is it a problem, some of this?
Well, I mean, there's so many different aspects to it that it's hard to just kind of round on one, but I don't know. I mean, Buck Henry recently interviewed a 22-year-old transsexual who, her appearance is of a woman with long hair, lots of makeup, and he has just realized in the last few weeks that his doctors lied to him. They said he would become literally a woman. They said that, and not only did he believe it, his parents believed it.
10% of my audience believe it.
Yeah. So this guy now has no sexual function, has no penis. He's a gay man who has had his sexual, life ended at 22. There was another famous video. This young woman, and this is it's such a heartbreaking interview, but she now looks like a balding middle-aged man. She has male pattern baldness because that's what the testosterone did to her. She was told that she would become a young, virile, gay man.
Yeah. And
instead, she has this appearance that looks like an accountant in a sitcom, and it was a lie. So when people say, "Oh, be kind," if you really want to be kind, you got to protect future versions of these kids who are being told an appalling lie. You know, like I'll give you another interesting one. I know this is very in the weeds, so to speak, but here's another interesting thing that I found out recently. Gay men have been telling me, a lot of young women who've been told that they're men, and they either have double mastectomies or they just have a very kind of masculine appearance or whatever. They're now going into gay spaces and they are expecting gay men to be in romantic relationships. One of the gay spaces that this goes on in is Grindr, you know, the hookup app.
Yeah.
Straight men are predating on those young women on Grindr. So straight men are joining Grindr,
Of course, right.
to predate on young women for whom the testosterone has not kicked in yet. And so they, and the way they talk about these women is disgusting, you know? And it's like, you've got to look out for, I mean, you can't just say be kind. You have to be kind. You have to look out for these people. You know,
Well, you have to be cool to be. I know it's such a cliche. You have to be cool to be kind sometimes. If it was easy, if everything was be kind, if that's how your best results in humanity were achieved, why wouldn't everyone be doing it? Of course they would. If you raise your children that way, just be kind. I mean, anyone who's got kids, I don't, but friends of mine do. If you're just kind to them all the time, no way. They take over everything. They're screamers. They won't learn about boundaries or anything like that. So, and the road to hell paved with good intentions. I mean, this channel I've got about cults, Scientology. The stuff at the beginning of Scientology is brilliant.
Oh, yeah, no, sure.
It tells all these people, you know, you can actually take control of your life. It's a little bit like what Jordan Peterson sometimes says. You can be in charge of who you are. You can do it. The problem is they take it so far that even when you've been violently attacked by a Hollywood celebrity, they say that was your fault because you did that to yourself. So that's where it goes too far. But these are all like, be kind, be nice. It's taking it too far without actually thinking about the consequences.
Absolutely. And you know, I remember Tottenham Court Road, there was a Scientology centre, you may know it.
Yes.
And I remember, you know, getting into arguments with the people outside, and they had no idea what we were talking about because they had not advanced through the various levels to receive full, what's the word?
You've got to get to OT3. Operating Thetan 3 is when you learn about Lord Zeno.
Yes, exactly. And they were lower levels. So they didn't know it was all going on. And I noticed the same thing with trans activists who either don't believe or they, you know, you can show them photographs of children who have, you know, children like pubescent or just post-pubescent children who have double mastectomies, and they don't see it as even if they either don't believe it's true or they twist it, so they say, why are you sharing these photographs of children, you know? And it's like everything except addressing the issue, which is these kids are I'm friends with a guy called Malcolm Clark, who you should interview at some point. I think you'd really get a lot out of it. He is an ex-producer on the BBC science show Horizon.
Oh, right. Yeah, I know.
And I remember Arthur and I were once watching that show, and I didn't realize, you know, I only found this out recently, but Malcolm produced the show, and it was about people who believed that they should cut their legs off because they felt this body dysphoria about their legs or their limbs. So they did this. And I remember at the time, Arthur and I were watching the show, and it was, you know, in that dark way, it was very funny because there was a person all through the show talking about getting a leg cut off, speaking to doctors about it. It was all arranged. And then they interviewed him after it was done. And they were like, that was a terrible mistake.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And they suddenly realized, as soon as it happened, they realized it was wrong. So that practice was discontinued in every field except pediatrics. How do you say it?
For kids doctors.
Kids doctors.
Let's just say kids doctors.
Yeah, okay.
Pediatricians?
Pediatricians, yeah. So how did the idea of you can cut a bit off yourself and you'll be happy, how did it survive in just this one area?
Ironically, podiatrists do cut bits off you and you're happy.
That's true.
So
That's true.
if you'd said that, I get it, but aren't some trans people who have had operations and things pretty happy?
Well, this, the jury is just out, on all that. We have a generation now. I think we're hitting the right age for detransitioner stories to start coming in, and there are in America a bunch of cases. We have Richie Herron over here suing the NHS. I don't know about that. Where are these happy? Where are they? You look at someone like Jazz Jennings, who's probably the most famous trans person in America, and he's morbidly obese. He is not lubricating the wound.
Oh, yeah.
So it is in danger of becoming infected. It's a whole thing. And people who take testosterone, young women who take testosterone, I was told this by a friend of mine, Elaine Miller, who works with women in menopause. Young women who take testosterone will enter the menopause 30 years too early.
Wow.
And the menopause is no joke. A lot of osteoporosis comes with it. And if you have osteoporosis when you're if you're in your 20s and you take a tumble, you just walk away from it. But if you have osteoporosis, that's your life changed forever. So no one realizes this. I don't know if you may not have noticed this, but if you ever want to follow up on this, I'll show you some of the evidence I have. But you look at various trans protests. A lot of these kids have walkers. A lot of them have walking sticks.
Really?
Yeah, because they have osteoporosis. The bone density just plummets. And another thing that happens is, like, I've heard so many testimonies of women in their 20s who've had to have hysterectomies, because another thing that testosterone does is it fuses the ovaries to, I can't remember, I don't want to say this wrong and get in trouble, so I'll be vague about it, but it fuses the ovaries to some other part of your body, cervix maybe, and that becomes diseased, and so you have to have a hysterectomy. So you get women in their 30s who are just now thinking they might want to have a kid, and it's all over.
And you only get one. I know everyone says this all the time, but you really do just get one go at it.
Yeah, they're talking about these procedures and these irreversible interventions as if it's getting a tattoo.
They need to be better informed if they are going to do it.
Exactly.
Much better informed.
Exactly. And at the moment, the people who are trying to inform them are being monstered. Their books are being hidden. Like, I don't know if you know Helen Joyce, but her book Trans, you couldn't find it anywhere. They put it, they put it in the stockroom. They say they don't have it. You have like, Helen wrote a piece about it today, and she was saying she met a presenter of Woman's Hour or something like that who said, "Oh, I'm sorry you couldn't be on the show." And she said, "I wasn't asked." And I said, "Oh, they said you weren't available." So you have staffers who are telling the bosses that, "Oh, yeah, she can't do it."
That said, I did email Helen Joyce to do this, and I haven't heard back. So she might have a problem with her email.
Maybe that's it.
It's going to her junk or something.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
yeah. Well, I'll say.
Please do. Yeah, I'd like to talk to her. And then Kathleen Stock is a good one. I think it was one of them. It might have been someone completely different. So forgive me if it was someone else who said this. But they were saying, I think in Japan that they didn't have until there was a magazine article. This might be complete bollocks, everyone, but there was a magazine article, I don't know when, 20 years ago, talking about America and the problem with and then suddenly in Japan it went through the roof. And a lot of people are suggesting this is what might be happening with trans social contagion with kids.
And there's a lot of parallels with like if another thing we notice is that, like, you see photographs of girls post-surgery, post-mastectomy, right? And you can see these faded lines all over their arms because they're self.
Oh.
So you can look at the double mastectomy as just the latest in a long line of cuts they've done.
They would say, if I steel man here, they would say I was so unhappy in my body and I needed the change.
Sure. But again, the idea that you cut parts off of yourself and it will help a mental problem that you have is so bizarre. And we've kind of sleepwalked into it. And you know what I mean? It's like unfortunately, it seems that, like, it will only be through these court cases that people will begin to say, maybe we should look at this a bit better, you know.
I think one of the biggest problems I have with this, and why I want to speak out about it as well, is I consider myself a feminist, a quiet feminist, because I don't think men, when men shout about it too much, sometimes I've been to rallies, at abortion rallies, for example, where the men are shouting over the women. I'll talk about this, and I find that really annoying. But a quiet feminist, and I really am impressed by women in my life who are incredibly impressive and strong. And what doesn't really work for me is this concept of I feel like I am a woman, and I say, okay, well, what does that mean? I've never ever, and I don't want to just parrot Matt Walsh, because Matt Walsh has some views that are very much further to the right than mine. But on this aspect, I've never heard a proper answer to that. What is a woman? And what is it that you feel like? Please, I really want to understand, what is it? Because if it is, and I'm not saying it always is, if it is long hair and nails and being a bit silly, then I find that on behalf of the women in my life, my mum, my fiance, my sister, I find that incredibly offensive.
Yeah, I'm still amazed that people say it out loud.
Yeah.
It's like, can you, like, how much more offensive can you be to say that a woman is what she wears?
I want to steel man it. I know I keep saying that today, but I want to know but what do you mean by woman? And then they go, it's a social construct. I go, no, but what do you mean? What feels it?
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, Stuart Campbell of the Wings Over Scotland website, he said a brilliant thing the other day. He said, someone asked him, why are you bothered, or something like this, and he says, because words have to mean things, or they're just noises.
Yeah.
And what scares me about this is when you break down such a fundamental relationship between us and the words we use and reality, then anything is possible. Yeah. The old quote, those who can make you believe in what is it, in I can't remember the exact quote, but
I think I know it as well, and I've forgotten it.
The second half of the sentence is can make you commit atrocities.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we've seen this happen recently in the reaction to the Hamas attacks. There's like a kind of there's an inability to address it as an atrocity. Even the term atrocity it seems to be losing its meaning.
The BBC refused, didn't they, to call them terrorists?
Yeah. And I think that's because when you break down the fundamental relationship we have between our words and what we experience, then we lose the ability to adequately deal with some very traumatic things. I worry about kids in the sense that they must when the bodies are not even cold and people are saying, great, brilliant that it happened. I'm excited by it happened. There's like a mass murder of civilians. Then I don't know. I would be very. I've been thinking about my kids a lot recently, because you've got to wonder how they're experiencing all this.
Yeah, that's really upset me as well. My family's Jewish, and just to see some of that, and to see friends of ours. I know, and I don't want to sort of get anyone I know in trouble, to be too specific, but someone I know goes into work every day, and friends of theirs, a few people I know have this experience, friends of theirs are all tweeting, these are not terrorists, this is what freedom fighting looks like. The very people that went in and did that in Israel have in their manifesto, clear, they're not lying, it says, our idea is we want to kill all the Jews.
Yes.
So how can you then, as a Jewish person, like a girl that I know, go into her work and sit down next to all these people who are basically saying it was good that these people who have a manifesto to kill you did what they did? I just don't know how you go on, but I just have to believe that those people don't really know what they're saying when they said that.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason I wrote a little bit about this in the book is because we are serving up to our Twitter followers. I'm not, but a lot of people are. Kind of reheated American opinions. Like America basically has a very different relationship with Israel, because there's resentment by the left that America has always been such a staunch ally, even when Israel has been very right-wing or militaristic or aggressive. There's a lot of resentment about that in America, but it's a different relationship that we have here. And so when I see what we've been seeing recently, I think the same thing I always think about all this stuff. We're just copying the Americans.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. There's so many of these things actually.
Yeah.
You Americans, stop it. When it was at, going back to you, when it was because it seems to be getting a bit better. Is it people are sort of being a bit more open about? Richard Ayoade wrote. I mean, didn't write about that, but he wrote about your book, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, I have a feeling that's why you can't be too angry about people not speaking up, because I have a feeling a lot of people want to speak up, but it's just hard to find a way to do so.
He got pushback.
Sorry?
Richard got pushback on
Richard
Twitter.
got pushback, but then I think what happened with him was they realised they were on a losing one with that, because people love Richard.
Well, his brother-in-law or cousin is Lawrence Fox, who's not a very popular character right now.
That's right. But Lawrence is a great example of why this is a tragic and awful movement. Lawrence isn't a political, analyst. He's an actor.
Yeah.
But he can't act because no one will let him. No one will hire him. And so I think I really feel for Lawrence. I did notice as well that the people who jumped on his recent what would you call it?
Oh, he called the woman not shaggable.
Said he wouldn't sleep with her.
Yeah.
The people who jumped on that are the same people who are arguing that TERFs should be cast out, and the same people who are arguing for an end to female sports and women's spaces.
Yeah.
So it's like they switch on this selective outrage when they can take down a political enemy.
It was a silly thing to say, though.
Yeah, it was. But as I say, he's an actor. He should be in a rehearsal room making the other people in the room laugh with stuff like this.
Yeah. You wouldn't say in an interview, well, I wouldn't shag that woman.
No, but again, I hate to say it so many times because it sounds like I'm really insulting actors. But he's an actor. Actors are young, horny dudes who they're usually quite good looking. They're
Did you add usually to suggest Lawrence isn't, or that you don't want to be saying?
No.
Lawrence
I think
he's
Lawrence
a friend
is a
of
very
yours.
good looking man. But they're kind of lads. They're laddish. A lot of actors are quite laddish, and so I just feel for him because I think he's very exposed. He's a conservative. That's fine, but even conservatives in their daily life, they don't broadcast their opinions every day. And he's in this position where it's really all he can do because no one will hire him to do anything else.
I do think
it's a huge tragedy. I think he's a good actor as well. I think it's outrageous what's happened to him.
I haven't seen anything with him in it, but I have even heard those who criticise him a lot saying he is a good actor, but so he must actually be quite a good actor.
Yeah, he is. He is.
If people are willing to admit that when they're on the other side of that argument, he must really be something.
Yeah.
So that is a shame. It is. I don't know what to feel about anything anymore. It's all just a mess, isn't it?
Yeah, but then again, stuff like this is great because a lot of the time, people just don't know what the arguments are. They don't understand the issue. They think they hear weird things that don't sound true. And it's like, well, they are, I'm afraid. It is happening. And, that's why we're getting into trouble, because we're addressing very high stuff with very high stakes. I have been told by families that I have stopped girls taking testosterone and boys, going through surgery. I have been told by some families that they were able to say, the writer of the IT crowd thinks this is all nonsense, and introduce it that way. And if even one of those stories is true, that's it for me. I'm so happy to be doing it,
And the guy from The Office as well, he's helped with that.
The guy from The Office,
Gervais,
yeah. Well, yeah, he's just kind of dipping his toe in, really. I mean,
I don't know. His entire specials, the last two, have been entirely translated.
No, you're right. Sorry,
he doesn't get the same flack though. This is another one, as you and JK. Maybe people again don't. It's because of what you said. He doesn't. He's not really seen as a lefty.
Exactly.
Although again, he's animal rights. He's a feminist. I think he is really. Maybe Gervais gets away with it because he's just so. I don't know.
I have a joke where I say, you never go to a poker room and hear someone say, Harry got misgendered, There's a certain group of people who just don't give a fuck and they're not affected by this stuff. The people who are damaged by this are the very people you want to protect. Social workers, NHS workers, female comedians. These are the people you want to protect, but they're the ones who get hurt by it. You know, I can tell it's like there's. Have you heard the phrase peaked? Do you know peaked?
No, what that?
That's a kind of good sign that you haven't been peaked because what we call being peaked is the moment where you realize how bad this is and how high the stakes are.
Like red pilled.
Yeah, I guess that's the version of that. Yeah, but we call it peak trans. You hit peak trans. And it's like when you just suddenly, and once you've been peaked, you can't really go back. And it's kind of a lucky thing for you that you're not peaked, because I think if you were peaked, you would be doing these interviews all day.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you can only care about so much, can't you? You know, otherwise it would be like, I'd be going, but the trans thing. And then what about, is Bill Gates putting things in the water? Maybe, I don't know.
No, my decision was to focus on it because no one else was. Or when I say no one else, there's lots of brilliant women who are obviously, and organizations that are fighting it. But there was no one who had the kind of level of I started talking about this before J.K. Rowling came out, so there was no one who had the same platform or access to a large amount of people, and I thought my celebrity would help get the word out and stuff. So you know, I think it's so important that I won't stop talking about it until more people start talking about it.
Yeah.
Then I'll feel I can relax a little bit, you know.
Did it just dry work up for you?
Sure. I mean, I just can't be guaranteed of any work because, like, you know, a producer might phone and say, "Love you to write on this," and as soon as one person in the post room says, "Oh, he's a bigot," then they go, "Who is he?" and they panic and they get rid of you. So, you know. The only way I could fight this was by growing awareness of the issue, so that if I ever do get work and the post boy says he's a bigot, someone can go, well, actually, no, he's trying to do this and this and this and blah, blah, blah. So, it's been dry, but luckily Substack has been a lifesaver, you know.
For so many people.
Yeah. Oh, God bless Substack. Yeah. You know, I mean, they put me on an adults only list, so I wasn't getting in search results.
Sounds like you're sending nudies or something.
I know. It's like they and then, you know, when they're caught, they're like, "Oh, it was a mistake." But you know, it's hard to know, really.
Yeah, I feel like I want to do that BBC thing of like there are other paid for members pages as well as Substack, such as Locals and stuff from Patreon.
Right. Yes. But Substack has just got a nice, elegant interface. It reads, you know, everything looks very professional. Yeah. It's a nice little platform. I really love it.
I got into Locals. That's my one now.
Okay.
Because you can still do the newsletters, but you can do like video live streams as well. Talk to your people. They can.
How many people do you get to on that?
I've got 10,000.
Okay.
10,000 there. Only started it last month.
Okay.
And they don't all pay though. It's only like if 10,000 paid $5 a month or something, it'd be all right.
Yeah.
That would be really nice. But was there? I'm just suddenly in my mind now. I didn't actually watch the IT Crowd. I watched Father Ted. I loved it. I didn't not love IT Crowd. It's just I was at that age when I was like out and about then.
Sure.
I wasn't watching TV anymore. You know, when you're in your 20s.
Yeah.
Was there an episode to do with trans? I remember hearing somebody who said, "Oh, we shouldn't have done that." Who said that?
Oh, it might have been Matt Berry.
I think it was Matt Berry.
Yeah. One of the things they like to do is when they're speaking to someone like Matt, they like to throw in that question and get people who I've worked with to you know. Turn me in, so to speak. Matt actually rang just after the interview appeared and apologized.
Did he?
Yeah. So I was really thankful to him for that.
Wow.
But funnily enough, that whole episode where Matt falls in love with a trans woman is based on a true story. You may not even remember him. Des Lynam?
moustache.
Yeah.
Pundit.
Des Lynam, apparently.
Is he about anymore?
I'm not sure if he's dead or what.
I think he's around then.
But the story goes that he was having dinner with this trans woman. She put this in her biography. She said, at one point, you know, I used to be a man. And Des apparently went, "Oh, okay." Just kept eating. And we were always so impressed by that we thought, you know, I never forgot it. And when Matt Berry came along, I thought that'd be a funny thing to base an episode on.
that I can see. I should watch the IT Crowd, really. Yeah, I mean, I know that the actors there are just my favourite comedy actors of all time. So I don't know
good.
why I haven't yet.
Yeah.
But Richard Ayoade, Matt Berry, Chris.
Yeah, it's them at their funniest, you know.
Christ, they're so good, those guys, and I can imagine Matt Berry doing that.
Yeah,
the voices he does.
He's hilarious. He's hilarious. You know, but Matt has to protect himself and got kind of, you know, had to make this statement. But you know, like if you watch the episode, it ends with him howling her name because he realizes he kind of lets her go and he realizes what he's lost. But they ignore all that stuff and they focus on something they can use to portray you as a bigot, you know? So it is what it is.
J.K. Rowling's book, apparently, there was a cross-dresser in the book and they used that as well. Apparently it had very little to do with the narrative.
Absolutely. It was just someone put on a woman's coat or something. They are desperate for dirt against her, you know? And none of it stands up, you know? She's like impeccably good-natured. You know, everything she says about trans people is very generous and compassionate, but it doesn't matter. You know, she stepped outside of the permitted viewpoint.
Yeah, the woman who made a point of saying Dumbledore was gay in her mind is now a bigot. The woman who was beaten in the street by a man. You know, just beggars. But that's what really gets me. Do you know her? Are you friendly with her? Have you met her?
No. She's kind of she rose her own hoe, if that's a phrase.
It just sounds like you said her name in a different way.
Sounds like I called her a hoe, which is terrible. No, she's never really particularly engaged with me on this.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think she probably sees it as a woman's issue and wants to
sure.
women.
She wants to keep it pure. I think it's probably wise, you know, because it means that you know, my thing is I refuse to be told how to speak about this issue because, you know, I'm very secure in my stance. So I, you know, like something like you know, Sam Smith, his pronouns that being they them. I will laugh about that for days.
I've got a problem with Sam Smith, actually, because I really hate the thing is, there is unfortunately a wrong stereotype about gay people in the gay community, you know, that used to come about that they were into children and, you know, and that's horrible. But then you've got someone like him who does not represent the LGBT community or whatever it might be, who goes around wearing like Teletubbies on his knees and children's things all over him.
He's got a tattoo of a young boy looking in the mirror wearing underpants.
Like, who is that for, if not for children to find your body in some way? I really have a problem with Sam Smith.
Yeah. Well, you know, like he seems extremely influenced by what you quote unquote queer culture. And queer culture is based on a lot of very dodgy academic, you know, people like John Money, who was an awful abuser of children, and Michel Foucault, who and a lot of other people who seem, to say the least, kind of laissez-faire about relations between adults and children, you know?
It's the far left, isn't it? A very extreme side of the left.
Yeah, it's about destroying boundaries, you know? It's like you know, the thinking seems to be that our world is too heteronormative and we need to destroy boundaries between male and female, between child and adult, whatever it happens to be, to make the world more equal or something. But it doesn't really actually add up in the end. It falls apart consistently when it knocks up against reality. It's great for a bit of academic masturbation, but it's not like it's not a way to run a society.
Yeah, it's university stuff. You're absolutely. It's the right term that you used there.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you ever? I mean, Frasier just came back. Would you ever bring back IT Crowd? I know Father Ted, obviously, unfortunately, the actor passed away.
Yeah, but I wrote a musical and they're just sitting on it. You know?
Oh, that's right. Of course you did.
Yeah. Songs by Neil Hannon.
There's got to be a TV channel, though. If you did a TV, you know, in America, it's got to be like a Fox thing that would take it.
No, they're sitting on it. They just refuse to let me have the rights to, you know, to make it. They're just sitting on it. It's like preemptive cultural vandalism. You know, and like You know, I don't know what they're waiting for. I mean, I keep thinking this. I must do this, but I must put in my will that they're not allowed to make it if I die, because I think that's what they're waiting for.
And they'll change bits or what, you know, take out
Yeah,
their
I'm
heart.
going to put it in my will. You're not allowed. You're not allowed to have it. You know.
Where and when can people get your book, Tough Crowd?
Oh, yeah, just the usual places. Amazon, go into bookshops. You know, sometimes, as I say, you sometimes get a problem with activist book sellers hiding copies. So just keep asking and yeah, use Amazon if all else fails.
Yeah. Don't go anywhere. Continue your education, my education, into overcoming cancel culture and getting views that aren't popular in the mainstream. You can't miss one of my favorite ever episodes with Nina Power about incels and men's rights. And it's a view you really might not have considered. So hit the like button here and click here to watch.